All right, I guess we can get started. Welcome to the WEBRTC Working Group Internet Meeting, March 25th, 2025. Only members of the Web Transport Working Group, or Web Transport, never mind, WEBRTC Working Group, sorry, can make substantive contributions. Let's see, next slide. We're governed by the W3C Working Group IPR policy. And well, yeah, and yeah, there's what I said earlier. Welcome. And we also have an upcoming meeting April 15th. Next slide. Here's our meeting info, latest drafts. And we need a scribe. Do we have a volunteer?
Consenting victim, yes.
Thank you, Don. So this meeting operates by the W3C Code of Conduct and Professional Conduct, Ethics and Conduct. I'm going to get this. We're all passionate about improving WEBRTC and the web, but let's all keep it cordial and professional. Next slide. So getting on the queue is done through Google Meet. Raise your hand to get into the speaker queue, lower your hand to get out. And I think we're probably not going to do any polls in this meeting. Document status. Posting in a W3C repo does not imply adoption. Adoption requires a call for adoption. And editor's draft do not represent consensus unless we've had a call for consensus. Next slide. These are the issues for discussion today. We'll start off with stats from Harald.
Yeah, that's my clue. Let me see. So L4S, as some of you know, network level strategy for packet marking and scheduling. Basically, it's been pushed heavily by Comcast and Apple, among others. And the result they're aiming for is to make sure that applications that set the L4S marking get put into a very low delay queue, and in return they expect applications that do the L4S marking to obey certain rules. That means that you don't build queues. So the mechanism is that packets can get marked at intermediate routers, and then the receiver has to reflect back to the sender. I got messages with these marks. That's a feedback message. And in RTP, this feedback message is called a CCFB, which is RC8888. It was a very cute number. So this has been verified to have a good effect when people implement it correctly. I'm very sure that we'll have people implementing it incorrectly, and we will have people not implementing it at all for a long time. So in order to figure out what's happening when we deploy it, we should have stats. Next slide. So the typical scenarios we expect to see is, well, if everything's perfect, the router with the congestion on the path will notice that a queue is building and send back a CE signal and say, fine, you know how to break in time. We also expect a good number of cases to have no L4S support. We experience congestion, but no CE markings. I mean, networks tend to be configured by eternal skeptical pessimists, and frequently skeptical pessimists have this tendency to clear anything they don't understand. So in some cases, we expect packets to lose their marks, which is irritating, but it just means that we have to fall back on previous strategies for congestion control. And the really bad one is what we experienced with the first version of ECT 10 years ago, that firewalls say, oh, I don't understand this, I'll just drop it. Which means that if you try to use the new feature, then your packets don't get through. And that's really bad, and we hope it won't happen. Next slide. So the obvious thing to do when you do information about what happened in a network on a WebRTC connection is stats. So we can have stats on sent RTP streams, received RTP streams, and transport. So it varies which parts are interesting in which cases. Next slide. So when you send packets, you want to know how many packets you sent with this marking on it, because the platform might choose to send none or just probes, or turn them on and switch them off if they don't work. All approaches have been tried with L4S for TCP, so we know that people will do this kind of thing. And on the receive side, we get packets received with no marks, packets received with ECT1 marking, packets received with congestion experienced. That's the one we should react to. Packets reported as lost, and number of packets that were lost but then arrived later. Typically, those are the results of packets reordering. But in order to calculate whether we encounter bleaching, the sender has to note which packets they sent with ECT1, and then look at the report that came back from those packets and match up. Okay, this was sent with ECT1, but was received with no ECT marking, bleaching. So it's also interesting to watch what kind of strategy the other side is doing with RFC 888 messaging. So we should really count those reports. If we want to know what rate they're sending them at, we just count the reports and divide by time, as usual. Next slide. So that's the brief proposal for that we should add these markings. There's a PR that I didn't link to. Oh yes, I have. 2 slides back, there's a link. 792 in WebRTC stats. And I hope this is just not controversial, and we should just add them. Adding those will allow us to monitor experimentation with L4S, so that we can actually get stats while we work on the last details to enable L4S. So, questions, comments? Yuan?
Is there another use case, or is it just because it seems you're saying we are experimenting it, and we want to gather some stats and finalize the algorithms and so on, the strategies, and then is there any use after that period, basically?
Well, FaceTime published figures about what the delays on a video call were with and without L4S, and so when I showed this to our management, they more or less said, "Okay, we have to do this." If FaceTime is able to do it and Meet is not, then FaceTime gets far lower delay than Meet, and that's just not what we want to see happen. So it's the use case is perfectly ordinary video conferencing, just getting the delay to be lower.
This is the the desire for L4S is, of course, lower delay, but the desire for stats, L4S stats,
No,
after the period of experimentation.
Detect what happens, and what we are getting. So the use cases, the scenarios where we diagnose were summarized on 2 slides back, and they're also explored in more detail in the README and the pull request. Or the explainer in the pull requests. So, for instance, if there are networks that don't support L4S, then we want to know that that's the reason why we have this delay in that network. If there are networks that support L4S, we want to know that we're getting the lower delay in that network, and we can see that the reason is that we are doing congestion control based on L4S.
And you always
So we always monitor.
Yes. So,
Can you-
so yes, I'm not an L4S expert, but so my feedback is more maybe on the API. If you go back a slide, can you? Yeah. So these are so sent RTP streams and received RTP streams are base dictionaries, which means they affect not just the local stats like outbound RTP, but also remote outbound RTP and remote inbound RTP.
Yes,
Is that your intention to populate them in both places?
that was completely intentional. I mean,
Right, cool.
On one side, it's on one side you can set these numbers from based on what you receive in feedback messages. That's the remote received RTP threats, and on the local side, you can set them according to the RC888 messages that you sent. So they're known on both sides.
All right, great. That sounds like the right thing to do. And also, I guess this is not unique to this particular stat, but what happens is if an SFU changes what stream it's forwarding to these, I guess they're packet counters, but they'll just keep counting.
Yeah, that's
You're observing the network at that point.
if you have what was that number? Not an SFU, but the other one. The one that terminates RTP sessions, that will definitely. Then we're just doing hop by hop. If it's an SFU that forwards packets directly into the same RTP session, then we will see these things just do what the packet counters do. I mean, stop going up when the SFU is not forwarding them.
All right, thanks.
Henrik?
Just a general comment about GetStat. In general, we often want to measure what happens in the wild, just in response to, well, what about when the experiment is over? There's very few metrics that we want to unship as soon as we're done with something, because we want to know what happens in the wild. It's generally true, and I think it would be true here as well.
Yes. Sven? You're still muted.
First of all, thanks for proposing this. We are really excited to have this L4S support to the browser. And I have two feedbacks. First of all, we are fully support this idea, and we have an internal review, and everything looks good for us. And second one is, you mentioned it, you want to get the status information from experiment. We want to know how we can involve the experiment.
So I think you've already been in contact with Per about
Mhm.
the experiment. So we're currently shipping support for our C888 feedback messages behind the flag. We
Yes.
have some bugs to fix before we can enable that generally. But there will be more experimental flags in the near future, so that we can start sending those bits.
Yeah, what I mean is we want to have a real user experiment without flag changes.
So we imagine that once everything works, we just want to have it enabled by default, of course. But I expect that there will be an original trial too, so that we can opt in some sites to say, okay, I want to see this happen. So yes, we will take that. We will work further on that with you.
Okay, thanks.
That's between Google and you. So great. I take it as we can ask for the merge of the PR, and comments on the PR are very, very welcome. I always make spelling mistakes.
Dom is also in the queue.
Oh yes, Dom.
Yeah, just wanted to check the regular design principle for stat. This is only meant for measuring. You're not expecting to change behavior based on those statistics, right?
No, we're not expecting to change any API visible behavior.
What I meant, an application wouldn't want to adapt its behavior based on collecting the statistics.
No, I don't
Okay,
think so.
thanks.
I mean, applications tend to want to have the lowest latency that they can get. So they just want to have it working. Okay, I think we're done, and we're ahead of time. Next speaker.
All right, next slide is Henrik.
Sorry, could I record that there is consensus to merge the pull request then, or?
Yes,
Well,
I think so. Or the change should say so.
I didn't hear any objections, so if there's an objection, please state so now, I think. Otherwise, we can proceed with the PR. Great. Not hearing anything.
Happy.
All right, codec and stats, more stats talk. Next slide. As I said, I have several issues. First one, so in WEBRTC PC, we added a codec dictionary match algorithm. It's used to check the input for set parameters and set codec preferences, etc. And so we have this algorithm, and I'm just going to give some background. If I can overgeneralize, we get back to why I say overgeneralize, but to generalize, codecs have, they come in different flavors. So a codec can have a profile and a level, and profiles are not compatible with each other. So you can have like BP9 with profile 1 or BP9 with profile 2. Different profiles are not compatible with each other, which means that they are negotiated as different payload types. They are, from an API point of view, they're basically separate codecs. But levels, on the other hand, are more about restrictions on this profile. So they convey the maximum resolution or frame rate that you could do for this profile. And this is not negotiated as different payload types or different codecs. You can negotiate, whereas I say I can do X, you can do Y, and then at the end of negotiation, we decide to do the minimum of the two. but it's the same payload type. And our APIs will not reject if a different level ID is used in some cases. So to state this even more generally, SMTP parameters can either be compatible or not compatible with each other, or you could say symmetrical or asymmetrical. But the actual matching is codec specific, right? So in H.264, you have this profile level ID, and you need to do some parsing to get out profile and level. And for H.265, there's separate FMTP parameters. So there's some codec specifics here, but we try to phrase the codec dictionary match algorithm to be codec agnostic. We tried, we almost did it. So next slide. The way we tried to phrase this in a codec agnostic way was to say that, if media formats are not equal, then returns false. So that we assumed media format is the symmetrical property, and we used highest complying bitstream level inferred as the language to talk about this asymmetrical property. And this works for, I think, all codecs except for one. So the problem that I noticed here is in the AV1 media formats, like all of the properties are asymmetrical when you look at that codec specific spec. So level IDX, profile, and tier all act as this level. You can offer profile 2 and answer profile 1, but this is the same payload type. So it falls into the first category. So the problem I want to solve is I want to sort of refactor the language of this algorithm so that the intent of it doesn't change, the decision to have this doesn't change, but the language is inclusive of codecs like AV1. That's hopefully uncontroversial. Any objections to that? Johnny Vai.
Just some questions. When you say the dictionary match algorithm, people might not know what APIs that affect. So this is my understanding is that's not doesn't affect negotiation so much as it affects our API's ability to discern multiple codecs as separate. So if we say things are the same, that means that we can't tell them apart. So have you thought about, so there's some loss of information involved here by saying these are the same. For instance, when you read codecs, we make sure that each entry in the codecs array that we return never match another entry in that array, for example. So is that
I think the API surface that where this shows up is when you call set codec preferences, the input to that algorithm is comes from get capabilities. So there I think we don't ignore levels. But when you call set parameters, if the get capability says I can do level 180, but what we negotiate is level 150, when I call set parameters, it doesn't matter if I put in 150 or 180. It should still understand which payload type I'm trying to tell the sender to use. And this is all old what we decided, but this is the sentence we need to update.
Okay, so it sounds like you want to modify the input rules for set codec preferences, but not necessarily alter the fidelity of information from get parameters.
I'm not trying to alter anything. Basically, FIPO pointed out that if you call set parameters with AV1, it throws an exception when we expect that it shouldn't throw an exception. So I'm just trying to make us be consistent with what we intended for this particular codec.
All right, that helps clarify. Thanks.
Okay, so next slide, I have a proposal for language. That's Bike said. The first proposal is to say, instead of saying if media formats are not equal, which sort of implies that this is the symmetrical property, we can rephrase this to say if media formats are not compatible. And then, we're still pointing to the codec specific specs to say which FMTP parameters are or are not, symmetrical, asymmetrical. But that's one way to phrase this. Another way to phrase this, I saw a language in RFC 3264, which talked about the FNTP parameters as either describing specific configurations or are more like parameters and can be different between endpoints. So we could also phrase this as if media formats describe different configurations or different parameters. Either way, I think this is an editorial decision. And I don't have a strong preference, but I put I said not compatible. I think conveys what we're trying to achieve. Thoughts, opinions, input. Or let's rephrase. Is anyone opposed to the editor's bike shedding a new wording for this to fix the problem I'm describing? Okay, I think I'm not hearing any objections. I claim consensus. Dom, write it down. Shall we go to the next slide? Okay, outbound RTP stream stats should be created early, I claim. Just a bit of background. So in get stats, we have outbound RTP streams and inbound RTP streams. The RTP stats are always measured per SSRC. So we can only measure RTP stats for SSRCs that exist. And then the question is, well, when does an SSRC exist? And the background here, we've done work here before when we detected browsers to do different things. But so when an SSRC is created depends. Here's the problem. The SSRC may or may not be signaled in the SDP. So for backwards compat, you could know the SSRC as soon as you set remote description. The problem is if the endpoint doesn't signal SSRC in the SDP, which is kind of what we want in the future, then you don't know what the SSRC is until you receive the first packet. So it's kind of brittle. And what we decided to do a few years ago was to say that we only create RTP stats when the first packet is sent or received. This would make it so the app has to be agnostic about whether or not SSRC is signaled. So I don't want to revisit the problem we tried to solve and solved. So I think fixing this problem was the right call. But now we are here a few years later, and I think browsers still don't align here because there's one problem that I'm hoping we can fix to get alignment. Next slide. So just off the bat, like delaying creation of the inbound RTP until the first packet is received, I think it still makes sense and we should keep it. And this is in fact the only part that was needed to fix the original problem that we fixed. What I want to challenge is delaying the creation of the outbound RTP stream stats. And the reason I want to create that one earlier, before you send the first packet, is that this causes some issues for simulcast. So to remind you, when you're receiving, you're only receiving one stream. But when you're sending, you could send 3 outbound RTP streams. And so the problem with the current language of the spec is the app does not know which SRC is used for which encoding on the simulcast stream until packets are sent, which means you have to either wait for ramp up to complete, but in some cases, if this encoding is inactive, you'll never know the SSRC until it's first used. And the reason this is a problem is that real-world applications, Google Meet is an example, has these stats pipeline dependencies where we need to know which SSRC is maps to which encoding ahead of time. It would cause issues otherwise because we're using the one side's SSRCs and the other side's SSRCs and match them. And the problem we have here is if we don't know the SSRC, if we poll get stats and we don't know what the SSRCs are, we have to fall back to some other way to get SSRCs, which means we have to parse SSRCs in the SDP. And you can kind of see how this is a problem, because the original problem we tried to fix was that SSRCs should not have to be signaled in the SDP, but now Meet is getting the SSRCs from the SDP. So next slide. Because the sender is a local, it's local, it already knows which SSRC it's going to use, whether or not it sent the first packet, and whether or not it's put them in the SDP. That's just information. Like, the sender knows what it's gonna do. So the proposal is to, instead of delaying until the first packet is sent, we just say that the outbound RTP stream set is created when the sender is configured. And then we should clarify, like, this happens when you set local description, or maybe it's remote description. I have to double check, but it should happen at offer answer time and exist even if 0 packets have been sent. While for inbound RTP, we keep the behavior. That's my proposal. Yes, Janivar.
Yes, I'd like some clarification on how early is. Is it when you go back to stable?
I think it's going to be when you get back to stable. I kind of want to check what the what Chrome is currently doing, and have a bias towards doing that. But I think delaying to stable, like, it's either going to be at has local offer, or it's going to be at stable. I don't think it should matter which one we pick, but the point is the sender should be configured and ready to go, basically.
I think might be able to agree on that. Have you thought, I mean, you're not just talking about exposing the SSRC, but all of the stats, right? So have you gone through and made sure that they're all exposable? I guess it'll be just a bunch of zeros otherwise.
It will be for counters, it's going to be 0. For some other fields, it's going to be undefined, like frame width. It's not going to have a value. It's going to be undefined. All of these metrics are well defined in this case. I don't expect any troubles there.
My only concern would be if there's some fields that the implementation wouldn't know the answer to before it actually starts sending. Maybe scalability mode with, I don't know.
No, I think the answer is either undefined or put the value you're going to use. But I'm happy to go through the metrics and make sure we don't do anything silly here. But the fact that this is already implemented in Chrome makes me think that there shouldn't be any surprises.
But just to clarify, the case you're not touching then is the incoming. Sorry, what was the other case?
Inbound RTP.
Inbound RTP, yes. So in that case, the recommendation is still for web developers to wait for the remote track to become unmuted. Is that right?
Yes, that's still my recommendation.
Okay, so hopefully we can get convergence around that.
Yeah. Well, muting, unmuting is it would be, I mean, for an app that just periodically polls, you might see a frame having been received, but not, like a packet been received, but not decoded yet, in which case I forget if you mute or unmute there, like some timing, but
yes,
this seems tangential.
My interest that, yeah, it's mostly tangential. Just wanted to highlight that there's still some incompatibility there around unmuting. So
oh yeah, sure.
That remains the best
I
practice.
don't think.
Cool.
Yeah. That's not changing there. Okay. So do we have a consensus? Anyone wants to object? Great. I'll prepare a PR for Thursday. Okay, and then a follow-up issue. It's very similar to this. Next slide. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, Johnny, right?
One, there's an outbound RTP, but there's also, you're just talking about outbound RTP, not remote outbound RTP.
Only outbound RTP. Wait, remote. No, but the remote one is only created when you get the first RTCP packet.
Yes.
So that one should be unaffected. That requires you to have a RTCP report.
Yes.
So that should be unaffected.
That has 4 tentacles, so I just want to make sure that we think of them all. Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, so next up, so we have all the SSRCs. We love them. We can get them now. We can call get stats. There's one remaining problems. What if an app doesn't use RIDs? It's an optional parameter. So the problem again, now we have the SSRC, but now the next question is, well, which outbound RTP maps to which encoding? And the sort of the spec way to do this is to check the RID. But if you don't have a RID, the RID is undefined on all your outbound RTPs. So you have, say, 3 outbound RTPs that belong to the same MID, and you don't know which is which. And in the example before, you might not have sent anything yet, so you can't look at resolution or frame rate or any heuristic like that. So, you could say, well, the app should just use the RID. We don't care. But I would argue that we should care, and it's very easy to add a simulcast index 012 to help you do the mapping without knowing RIDs. And I think this would help both, because the RID, I think it's worth helping apps that don't use RIDs, because that's sadly reality is everyone doesn't use the RID yet. But also, even if you do use RIDs, there's no standard way to know which character means which encoding. So if you want to write a stat parsing library that just always works, you can't do that without someone giving you a mapping to say this app uses this mapping. So we found this useful in the C++ library, and I thought, shouldn't we just expose this to the web as well? That's what I'm proposing we do. Anyone want to object? Geneva?
So can you describe the use case? You sort of did, but a little bit more detail. So this is someone who's not using A equals simulcast, right? They're munging SDP using non-standard.
They're not. Well, they could manage SDP, but they could be doing that. But even if they don't, like the RID is as an optional parameter to add transceiver. You could just not specify it.
You can use A equals simulcast without a RID.
You can say pc.add transceiver encoding, create 3 encodings with different scalability modes and different scale resolution by, but you don't specify the RID.
You could do that, but then I have no sympathy, right?
Yeah, well, that's one option is to say screw you, but
well, let's pick that one then. Is there another use case?
Well, I have sympathy for apps that want to know the SSRC without having to update their pipeline to do something that seems kind of separate from this.
Well, I'm aware of some. I think most SFPs now support MID and RIDs, but I'm aware of some that rely on older mechanisms, non-standard mechanisms, to munch local SDP in some browsers to use the SSRC group.
You can go into you can go into WEBRTC internals and you'll figure out that here in Google Meet, RID is not specified, which means Meet is parsing the SSRC. If they didn't have to parse the SSRC because we had simulcast index, that would be one step closer to removing SSRC munging. Like, I think if we help, I don't see this as a way to have apps not have to ever use RIDs. I see this as a way to unblock us from making SSRC munging like illegal. This seems like a blocker for removing SSRCs from SDP, basically.
Well, isn't it more accommodating people who are using SSRCs? I'm confused.
Well, it's hard to tell people to just stop. Well, I guess they could just update the RID while they do that. Not sure actually. But right now they do have to parse the SDP, which I find horrible.
Right. So I'm not sure I'm opposed, but I would like to hear more. I'd like to understand the use case better before agreeing, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, one use case is in WEBRTC internals, we do these dashboards and we display the graphs for the calls. And that's not just a browser implementation. You have, I think Fippo created a demo page where you create stats dumps and you paste it into his tool. And then in the tool, you display these graphs. I find it really annoying that today, because it doesn't know which encoding is which, these tools just show the single cost encodings in random order. I would like them to be ordered. And that's one use case.
So there's a use case to learn to, but you don't have the RID in that case you mentioned?
You don't have the RID. Like, if you have a tool that parses stats that doesn't know app specific logic, such as which RID you happen to choose, which is an app choice, then you don't know how to sort them.
All right, well, I'll get off the queue, but if there's no other people objecting, then I'd like to follow up after the meeting to maybe I can get on board if I understand the use case a little more.
Harald?
Just note that RIDs are not sortable. You can't figure out from the RID which one is the first and second and third encoding.
Yeah, you don't know that it's an app specific choice. So the app would have to tell you, if I say Q, you should sort this as number 0. If I say H, you should sort this as number 1. But the app can do whatever it wants.
I believe it's exposed though by the get parameters, so you can match them and see which one's first in the encodings array sequence. So I think you have that information.
Do we have that? Might do. Anyway, I still think it's ugly, and this is cheap to add. But
so we are aware of some websites that the Firefox still exposes A equals SRC, and we are aware of some websites, not that many, but some that rely on basically legacy SSRC-based simulcast. I'm wondering if there's some utility here. But wondering if we can dig into that, maybe.
You are correct with this present.
Sorry?
You're correct. Get parameters does expose RID.
Right.
Sorry, what's the conclusion?
Well, I'd like to understand it a little more. Maybe I could follow up with you to work out my understanding.
Sure. Can we say no objections, except possibly from Geneva TBD?
Okay, that works for me. Also, the name, I'm wondering if we could avoid the word simulcast, maybe call it something else, encoding index, SSRC index.
Encoding index works for me.
Right.
All right.
Thanks.
Then we have next steps, and I'm done. Thank you.
All right, we're 3 minutes ahead. Let's see what's next.
Next speaker.
Screen capture pixel ratio. Is that you?
No, I think. Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me. Yeah. My name is Palak, and today I want to talk about adding a new pixel ratio for screen captures. So this is in follow-up to a presentation that was done by Konrad Hofbauer at TPAC last year, which was about physical and logical resolutions, which got a pretty good feedback in the working group. And this proposal is currently being tracked in the issue number 316 in the screen share spec, and also has a corresponding PR number 315 in the same spec. And I think I would first like to start by revisiting the need for this proposal. So applications that use screen share can limit the meter stream tracks resolution using applied constraints. And they might want to do that for multiple reasons, such as to conserve the system resources or to adapt the resolution according to the available bandwidth while maintaining a good quality. To make this decision effectively, an application would like to know the operating system scaling and also the zoom, paid zoom, especially for tab captures, which it can then incorporate via the width and height setting in applied constraints. Next slide. Operating system scaling is done differently across different platforms. So for instance, here in top left, you have Windows, where it's the same value as in the scale setting in system settings. For Chrome OS, it is set by setting the display size in system settings. For Mac, there is no such setting. But if one chooses a low enough resolution on a high DPI display on let's say on a retina display, then the operating system will generally render it in a higher resolution, will internally render it in a higher resolution, and then scale it to the chosen resolution in the system settings, which kind of gives the same effect as we want, as it is in the operating system scaling. At the moment, there is an API called the device pixel ratio in the window interface in JavaScript, which incorporates the value of operating system scaling and page zoom. But this value is only for the page where the JavaScript is running and not for the captured surface. Moreover, if your captured surface is a window or a screen, this value should just incorporate operating system scaling and not page zoom, which is not possible with this API. So we propose adding a new pixel ratio, which would be defined as operating system scaling multiplied by page zoom for if it's a captured tab surface. Otherwise, if it's a window or a screen, then it would be same as operating system scaling. And this lets the application use the two resolution, which would be relevant for the aforementioned use case. A display surface resolution, which already is defined today as the media stream tracks gate capabilities max width and height, and a device independent resolution, which would be the display surface resolution divided by the pixel ratio. Some usage examples of having these resolutions are, for instance, applications can send track at a device independent resolution to save resources, as this is lower than the display surface resolution. It consumes less CPU and needs less bandwidth. And in a resource constraint scenario, it's a good trade-off to have where the application just might want to have things that are readable. In another use case, an application can also choose a resolution based on the content type. For instance, if you have a spreadsheet or a text, then the application might want to send it in the display capture resolution to keep as much detail as possible. While if it's a dynamic video, then the application might not mind sending it in a device independent resolution, as it's more tolerant to quality loss. Next slide, please. Thank you. The proposal is to add a new attribute called pixel ratio to the media stream tracks settings interface in the screen share spec. The value of this ratio would be equal to the operating system scaling multiplied by page zoom for tab captures, and for window and desktop captures, it would just be the value of operating system scaling. Next slide. And here we have a usage example of how this API can be used. So, for instance, in this example, an application would like to send out the device independent resolution if the resources are constrained. And this is how the code will look like. Let's first get the display surface width and height using the get capabilities width and height max. And it can get the pixel ratio using the get settings pixel ratio. And then it can set the width and height apply constraints using the display surface width and height divided by the pixel ratio. That's it for our presentation. Thank you. Any comments or feedback? Anyone?
Yes, I think this is a good idea. The only thing I would caution, I think, is that adding a constraint, the constrainable pattern probably means we'll have to implement this expose is not just in settings, but in capabilities and constraints as well. And we could probably come up with a fitness distance similar to aspect ratio or something else. It doesn't matter too much.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, it seems like a good idea for like Windows and screen. I'm less sure about page zoom because when you change page zoom, CSS properties might change, and some parts of the web page might grow and some others might shrink and so on. So I wonder whether taking into account page zoom for captured tabs is always a good idea. So that's the only thing. Like if you're zooming on these slides, for instance, by 200%, I'm not sure you would want the resolution to be divided by 2. So I look forward for experiments. In any case, I would certainly be okay with starting with adding the property either for all without considering page zoom, or maybe with the may, or if you're really sure about it, then we can discuss. But so what's your thoughts on using page zoom? That would be the question, really.
So what's the question?
What's the need for page zoom?
Yeah.
Well, that's the value that's how it's explained. Although it's not mandatory to incorporate. So the way device pixel ratio is defined, it talks about the page zoom. So because it talks about CSS pixels, like the already existing device pixel ratio. Although browsers are not mandated to incorporate the page zoom. So we could make the page zoom option, or maybe we could have the two ratios so that if you only want the operating system scaling, just use that. So I think Firefox and Chrome always incorporate the page zoom in device pixel ratio, and I think Safari doesn't.
Okay. That's very nice. In that case, I would tend to piggyback on their definition, maybe. But in any case, it would be really useful to do the experiment on the various browsers and like using a page zoom of 2x and see whether actually dividing by 2 is a good idea or not.
Anyone?
Yeah, I had the same concern. Like, it doesn't seem like, given the problem we're trying to solve, it seems a little odd that the page level zoom is an input to that calculation. So yeah, but I think we'll probably know it when we see it, if it works correctly or not.
Yeah, I think it comes from the fact that the way we're defining this is a device independent resolution, which is defined as a CSS pixel, and for pages, that does include the page zoom if you're talking about a web page. And we also would like to, I think, know what the user is seeing, who is which is actually being shared. So I think that's why we want to incorporate the page zoom.
But for example, if I'm sharing my slide presentation and I'm already capturing that and sending it to the meeting, if I now use the keyboard shortcut to double my page zoom, it seems odd that would change. That would, what we're just discussing then, should that change the exposed get settings pixel ratio on the capturing application? And if it does, we might fire a configuration change event, and it doesn't seem logical to me why the capturing should change its capturing settings in that case.
Maybe it could be another property like Guido mentioned, like a device pixel ratio and a page zoom for captured tabs.
Yeah, that sounds good as well.
Yeah, that will work.
Yeah, that's just defined for tab captures if that's a page zoom and not for
Application might decide to, it makes sense that application wants to just remove the operating system scaling and not the page zoom. But some cases we want to remove the zoom so that reduce all possible zoom.
Okay, I'm still fuzzy with the usage of page zoom if it was alone, but we can we are not blocked to make progress on device pixel ratio anyway.
Thank you.
Okay, so the resolution is then to discuss the PR. Generally, no objections, but discuss the details of the PR.
Yeah, I think that's rough consensus on device pixel ratio OS based, and we need discussion more on the idea of page zoom. Yeah.
Okay. Move on to next. Interrupt. I think that's usual.
Okay. So next slide. So maybe some of you know, maybe you don't know, but there's a WPT Interrupt 2025 that is kicking in. It's a yearly effort to improve interrupt on the web using WPT as a tool to improve certain areas. So the idea is really that the WPT team, with the help of the community, is trying to select key areas where we have WPT tests, and the WPT test ratio is not like 100%, so it would be great to improve that. So this year, there was the process started in September 2024, where the idea was to propose areas of interest. Then there was a selection, and there was advertisement of the finalized selection. Maybe in December it was finalized, and it was advertised in January or early February. So next slide. So yeah, these are the results for 2024, WPT Interrupt 2024. You can see that overall the interrupt is like 97. So it's, and you can see it start like at 70. So it's a great way to make progress. I don't know about how other user agents are handling, but internally it's a very convenient way of getting the time to fix bugs that might otherwise be a lower priority. So it's very convenient. And so next slide. So this year in September with Yanivar and Guido, we started to discuss whether we could use WebRTC. We could use WPT Interrupt for WebRTC. And we had like 5 proposals. I think that most of them, I think Yanivar proposed all of them, but we discussed them. And so 2 were selected, script transform and WebRTC data channel transform. And some were proposed but not selected, like more private number devices and video track generator. And you can see the results here. Like we're like at 75%, and hopefully by the end of WPT Interrupt, we will be at 100% for, or 99% compact for script transform. So it's really exciting. It's really exciting to see that. But at the same time, I thought, hey, we did that like the 3 of us somehow, and with the help of the team, like all web developers are free to actually advertise they can say, hey, I prefer this topic over this topic and so on. So next slide. My question is to the WebRTC working group. Should the WebRTC working group get involved there? Should it try to help driving that effort? Meaning, if we use WPT Interrupt to help WebRTC Interrupt as well, should we gather input from WebRTC working group? I looked at the WebRTC folder, There are around 2,000 tests in the WebRTC folder. Apparently around 600 tests are failing in at least one user agent, for instance. So it's not too bad. It's but it's not super great either. There's also the question of whether to improve WPT testing infrastructure. We talked like maybe 4 years ago. I don't remember, Harald or Fippo knows no more. To have this echo server where we could do more packet analysis and testing, and it's being blocked. So maybe we should actually put more effort there. And there are other areas as well. Media capture is particularly hard to test. We are seeing some issues, some interrupt issues like muted and so on, and we are making progress. I don't know whether WPT could help there, but maybe it could. So these are the slides there. I'm interested in hearing about thoughts and where people would place energy and so on. So floor is open. Yeah, Yanivar?
Yes, I'm generally supportive of this. So I do think that there's a question from Tim on the chat here.
Yeah.
Encoded transform is RTC, RTP script transport. That's also data channel transfer in workers. That's why I should comment on the previous slide that was still red for Firefox. We're still working on that and aim to ship that soon. But yes, in general, I think this is a good idea. There are a couple of ways you mentioned already that we could help improve testing infrastructure, but also perhaps I guess the question when you say get involved, are there other ways you wanted us to get involved, as for instance, choosing topics and those kind of things for 2025?
For 2026, yeah. I was wondering whether, because we selected topics and we discussed topics in an ad hoc way, right? And maybe that's fine. We were free discussing that, but maybe getting more input. For instance, there's a WebRTC folder. There are like 600 tests that are failing. Maybe some tests, fixing some tests are higher priority than others. I don't know. So how do we decide? Are some folks in this community able to help focusing which bugs to fix, which interrupt bugs to fix and so on? So that's the question. Dom?
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to involve the working group. One simple proposal might be to raise the question of most painful interrupt bugs you're aware of a few weeks before the period to collect interrupt proposals open up. And this working group clearly has a number of developers using the WebRTC. We're not just developing the API itself. I wonder if we could put efforts into going even a bit beyond that. I recall that a team ran a survey a couple of years ago among WebRTC users, and so I wonder if we could piggyback on this to collect more thorough input than just people involved in the working group. But overall, I think structuring this as part of our agenda, putting it at the right point in the timeline so that we can bring input in a timely fashion, that all sounds good to me.
Okay. Harald?
Just pointing out that interop is perhaps not the place where the working group could help most, because last year we had a couple of suggestions for interop where the problem with the suggestion was that it was trying to enforce cohering on a spec that we didn't have consensus on. So focusing on getting consensus on some of our more advanced features rather than doing partial implementations of partial functionality because we can't agree on some of the pieces, that might be a better use of our time.
Okay, Henrik?
I know that a few years ago we had a hackathon when we met, in the real flesh world. That seems like a related topic. Like next time we meet, should we dedicate a day to just hacking and trying to pass web platform tests?
You mean TPAC next TPAC?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's true that ATF has this notion of hackathon, and TPAC does not really have that, but that could be a good way of doing things as well. Yeah. Testathon. Harald?
Yeah, just IETF hackathon is about 10 years old, I think. And it's been successful, mostly successful when we had agreement on focusing on a particular feature that was agreed to within a relatively small group, so that we could prove that it worked. So it doesn't mean that everyone has to work on everything. The last hackathon I went to was I think about 20 different groups working on completely separate things, and most of them being like no more than 5 people. So what hackathon we could do and what format it should have is interesting to discuss. I think it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, just for instance, looking at the 600 tests and triaging them and being able to sort them somehow, and that would be really useful, I guess. Yeah, Janivar?
Yeah, so one of the things that happened in 2025 interop, I think, that makes me think that this working group could be helpful is exactly areas where there is disagreement, but there's also an appearance of some agreement in published documents, in that there's a subset that does appear to have consensus, and there's another subset that does not. So getting the working group to agree on where we can make partial incremental progress, for instance, might help so that we have a better experience next year.
Yeah, it's true that if we take the example of more private enumerated devices, we have a spec and we have widely different behaviors from browsers, and it's not helping web developers. And we have a tendency to forget about these issues. And the fact that it was pushed forward, at least now we have some issues and we're trying to solve these issues. It's unclear whether we will be able to get consensus, but at least we tried again, and we have more information now than before starting this process. Okay, I think it's the end of this discussion. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, maybe I will contact Tim or he's there, but apparently he's in a train, so it's difficult for him to. But I guess making some kind of survey end of August, beginning of September, and maybe trying to focus on like the 600 bugs in WEBRTC folder, and maybe being able to select a subset and providing that as input to interop. That could be useful improve interop. Okay, thank you.
Take this view and Geneva with the graph back.
I think it's you, Johan.
Okay, next slide.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, GC of capture tracks. So capture tracks like get user media or get display media tracks are super, super expensive. Of course, they're expensive in terms of CPU and GPU usage, but they're also very intrusive to users. There are a lot of capture indicators, and users tend to notice the capture indicators and so on. So it's very important to get that right. Websites may be buggy. We had a report of one website which was buggy, and in one browser everything was fine, but in another browser capture was ongoing while the web page was actually not trying to capture. So GC can help. That is maybe not sufficient. So at least we should fix or maybe agree on how to GC, and maybe you can do some other things. So what can we do? Next slide. So MediaStream track has a few events: unmute, unmute, unended, configuration change. So it seems we should allow GC of MediaStream track if either track is ended or track has no even its listener. We have like some wording in WEBRTC PC about peer connection and how to garbage collect peer connection. There's the same for other specs like I know message port, WebSockets. They all have a section also for how to GC some events. So I think we should try to provide rules like that. Hopefully, they might be the same between the different browsers. Otherwise, at least we can try to converge. And also, we should add a note for web developers so that we strongly encourage them to explicitly close capture tracks because they are very expensive. And it's an existing pattern, like for video frame, for instance, which is also expensive. The spec says, hey, please consider closing explicitly video frames. So I think we should probably do the same for tracks. And I'm also considering adding like warnings in the console message when the capture tracks is actually GC'd without being closed. That's hopefully that might help decrease these kind of bugs. Next slide. So MediaStream is actually having storing a strong graph to its MediaStream track. So you cannot garbage collect a MediaStream track if you're not garbage collecting its MediaStream. MediaStream has some even listeners on that track, on Remove track, but so far I think they're only used by peer connection MediaStream, meaning that if you clone a MediaStream or if you create a MediaStream via get user media, these even listeners will never be of use. So we could allow GC of MediaStream if either MediaStream is not from peer connection. So we need to find some good language because we don't want to specify in media capture main MediaStream coming from peer connection, but hopefully we can find some infrastructure to clearly separate that. Or we could also GC MediaStream if it has no even listener. And yeah, these are the two proposals. Thoughts? Yep, Yanivar?
Just to clarify, when you say proposal, I believe all implementations today already garbage collect. So just to clarify, are we just talking about aligning around existing implementations? Because I think most implementations today will relinquish the camera or microphone after about 3 seconds if you no longer, or 10 seconds, if you no longer keep a reference to it in JavaScript. Is that? What would be the change? Is there a change?
There would be change
to we need to make.
There would be change to the spec saying you can garbage collect an object if blah, 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 blah. And we have this wording in WebRTC, and there are other places in other specs, like I said, WebSocket, message port, and so on. They define the rules. And I don't know how Firefox is implementing garbage collection of media stream track. I don't know how Chrome is doing as well. But maybe we can converge specifically on these rules. Of course, we can give some leeway, I guess, because you can be smarter in some ways. You can know that event listeners will not be fired in some specific places, but at least we could say, if you're in this case, you can garbage collect. And whether you're garbage collecting or not, that's up to the user agent, of course.
Yes. Okay. So I'm just making clear that it didn't seem, I couldn't see anything that you were asking for here that was a major departure from how browsers work today. So if this is just about better spec language, meaning we can write better web platform tests, I'm all for that.
For instance, I know that Safari was not garbage collecting media capture tracks only if they were ended. And because there could always be event listeners. So I recently added event listener checks, for instance. So I changed the behavior of how media stream tracks are garbage collected in Safari. And having the spec saying some things about that probably would have helped in the first place.
Great, thanks.
Harold?
So how do you write web platform tests for garbage collection, given that it's supposed to be not observable?
You cannot.
Well,
you will need a specific web inspector API, for instance.
That used to be true, but it isn't. Sorry, I'm jumping in. I thought that was, it is observable now, but maybe
It
not
is
beyond.
observable in WPT. There is a special WebDriver call for
Oh, yeah, if there's a WebDriver, like we can write some tests. I wrote some tests internally that is using a specific API that is also available in
so
other areas. So WebDriver, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a documented API that allows us to observe it. That's good to know. I had written some tests using internal APIs before, but they could not be web platform tests.
Yeah, I didn't know either. That's good to know, yeah.
Dom, can you put the put the link to the spec in the spec for those in a minute?
Will do.
Thank you.
Henrik?
Yeah, I have a similar thinking. I think so. It's great if we can test garbage collection in WebDriver, because then we can say in the spec that you basically must be more aggressive in garbage collecting these things. But I'm wondering, like, alternatively, because if we're talking about this thing going away, and like alternatively, you could just say that some version of, if the track isn't used in some amount of time, then the user agent must end the track. But that begs the question, is this observable or not? We do have an unended event, but of course, if anyone hears that event, that means we have event handlers. But I was wondering if we say in this scenario, the track should end, that might be, I don't know, easier to test. Because, like, what if you have you attach an event listener, but you don't use the track? Should we keep it around or should we garbage collect it?
Currently, you need to keep it around. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And garbage collecting in and of itself is like if the track is ended, as far as I know, I think like all the expensive resources are freed up, and like whether or not the actual, shallow track object that references all this heavy stuff, if that thing is still around, seems to not matter. The important thing is the track stops capturing.
Yep.
But maybe if this isn't observable, it might not matter. But that's another way to phrase this: ending versus not ending.
Yeah, it's correct. When the track is ended, you can GC it, but you will not get as much. But Yeah, I don't think there's a clear solution to, like an easy solution to fix that. Or maybe you can have a timer, and if the track is not used anywhere, you could stop the capture, but that's not something that we are doing currently, at least. I don't know how web compatible that will be. Yonivar?
Just to note, I think in general, I don't know if this is written down anywhere, but I think garbage collection mostly is treated as an optimization by user agents, and doesn't have to rely necessarily on specs to flesh out. The golden rule is don't do anything that is observable, and then you're free to delete whatever you want and free up resources. But I also agree that it's usually nice if specs write something about something that the domain expert, for instance, in WebRTC in this case, would help garbage collector developers stay clear of special things like usually event listeners and ways, and help developers remind them of what is observable in a specific API.
So maybe a question to user agent implementers. Have you seen cases where tracks were kept alive while the web page lost interest, like bugs like that in web pages? And do you think like having a warning in the console message will actually help or not?
I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but I think the issues that we have seen is that like if you forget to stop the track, the light on the camera is still on, and that's very much a visible bug, right? So
yeah,
I think that could be another, like, garbage collect or not, if that's an implementation detail, but like if we end it or not, that should be observable to the user, like looking at this light. So that might be good to have like if all browsers turn off this light at the same time, that it might be good.
Yeah, just note that some implementations will turn off the light sooner, like disabling a video track in Firefox. There's the affordance in media capture main to relinquish the device.
Only if
but yes, generally it's a good idea.
Only if enable equal false, right? You're not relinquishing the camera in other ways until all media stream track are stopped. Yeah.
Usually garbage collection bugs tend to flip the other way, where Firefox had a bug, or still has a bug, I think, where if you don't hold on to a data channel, it might disappear on you.
Yeah. Yeah, the event will not be fired and you will lose information. Okay. Is there consensus on going forward with this idea? Okay, it seems so. So next topic then. Okay. Maybe next slide. That's okay. Media recorder is type supported deprecation. So a year ago, we decided that it would be good if we could freeze is type supported. And there's an ongoing PR from Yonivar, and I thought having some discussing some of the details might be useful. So Yonivar, please jump in. I'm trying to summarize what I think your PR is doing and what I thought it was doing initially before actually reading carefully your PR. So, but in a case, if I got it wrong, please fix it. Next slide. So I think that Yonivar's PR is to say that when we freeze, is type supported, then if we pass a codec to is type supported and the user agent does not know it, then the user agent would return false synchronously. If the user agent knows,
not entirely, no.
Oh,
okay. The algorithm is a bit so media recorder has a constructor that is obviously synchronous, and its type supported is also synchronous. Sorry, you're talking about its type supported.
Yeah.
Not the constructor. Sorry.
Yeah.
Continue. Sorry about that.
So now let's say that we have a codec, a MIME type that the user agent knows and supports. Then it would return true, meaning that new codecs you get true. And if the case where that is a bit more complex is if a codec, the user agent knows the codec and it also knows that it does not support it, then it would return false if it's a legacy codec, like VP8, for instance, and it would return true otherwise. And then later on, when it would asynchronously fail, meaning that you create the media recorder with the MIME type, and then the media recorder will be correctly constructed and will fire on error asynchronously to say, hey, I'm not supporting it. So that would be the way to asynchronously know that a codec is not supported.
So just quick question. Are you
Yeah.
describing what we're currently doing, or are you describing Janiver's PR?
Janiver's PR. Currently, there's no codec list. So currently, you're supposed to always know whether you're supporting or not. So if the user agent knows a codec and does not support it, you're supposed is type supported is assumed to return false currently.
So yes, so is type supported will be filtered basically by a list of old codecs, the H.264, VP8, VP9, AV1, and maybe PCM and Opus. And if it's anything other than that, it would return false. But in the media recorder constructor, which is also synchronous, that's the more iffy part in that case it will still return synchronously false if it's one of those codecs and the browser in question doesn't support it. But for anything outside of that list, it will just say that's fine, and then instead you get an error later when you call start, which then fires an event asynchronously. And there's an existing code path there for failure on error that we're reusing here, basically, where you would get a not supported error almost immediately. So you'll optimistically go and start it, and then only to get an error immediately that says not supported. Does that help?
So in a way, for codec list, you still keep regular is type supported true false behavior. But if you're not in the codec list, the only way to know whether it's supported or not is actually by constructing media recorder and then starting and waiting for the on error or getting some data.
Or using media capabilities.
Which is the preferred way. Yeah.
Record. Yeah.
Next slide. So what I thought it would do is that is type supported would return true false if the codec is in the codec list. And if you're not in the codec list, then is type supported would always return false. Meaning that if you have a new codec, is type supported would always return false. And for the constructor, we would need to fail asynchronously. So there would be this idea that we keep the fact that you can construct a media recorder and you can fail it asynchronously for codecs that are not supported, but the JavaScript engine does not know it. It needs to go to the GPU process and know asynchronously that. In that case, so that was what I was thinking.
That's also what I think my PR is doing. How is it different?
No, because for instance, let's say that later on we have AV2.
Mm-hmm.
then a user agent will know AV2, and if it knows it does not support it, then synchronously it would return. It might return true if it knows it supported.
Oh, so this comes down to I don't think you've defined what codec list is.
So the codec list is the legacy codec list. So VP8, VP9. So the PR that Yonivar has written is adding a list of legacy codecs where we would keep the existing behavior, and new codecs would have a different behavior. And in what I understood initially, for new codecs, is type supported would always return false. And with Yonivar's proposal, is type supported would always return true.
It does? Oh, I see.
And
So it was a mistake, and we have consensus.
maybe not. I mean, by having is type supported always return true, it's more web compatible somehow, because then the web page tries and will fail. Oh, there's an error and so on. So I don't know. At least that's my understanding of where things are.
If that's the only difference, I'm amenable to changing that part.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. So there's that. And the second thing, next slide. So there's the notion of, so in the MIME type, you have like the codec, and then you can have a profile as well. And I don't know how Chrome and Firefox are handling profiles. What I know is that Safari is just for HDC, H.264, and so on, AV1. We are just checking whether this codec is supported, whether we have an encoder. We are not checking whether a particular profile is supported. So we're just getting a Boolean from an external process currently, and we are not checking at all profile synchronously in the web process. And so it's not in the spec, and I don't know whether it's really aligned with what Chrome and Firefox are doing. So I was wondering what we should do there in terms of codec validation by is type supported. And more generally, once we start recording, Safari is trying to match the codec profile, but if it cannot match it, it will select something else that it supports. So it's I don't know whether it's allowed by the spec, but that's what we are doing. And I wonder what other user agents are doing as well there. In any case, I think we want media capabilities to be able to expose the provide support information, like you pass the profile and media capabilities will tell you supported or not. But that's different from is type supported returning true or false. We can make a different decision there as well. Henrik?
So full disclosure, I don't know the media recorder implementation details, but I do know that at least in other areas like WebRTC, when we query the media capabilities, whether it's a synchronous or asynchronous thing that's resulted in this query, we get all the information, including the profiles. So I would find it surprising if we only fetch a Boolean, right? Like it would not only be a surprising behavior, I think, if an API says a profile is supported that isn't supported, but it would also mean that we'd have to implement multiple matching algorithms. It kind of feels wrong to me, but in terms of what we actually do, I don't know. It would be good if the spec can say, do whatever we're doing, and hopefully we can align on that. But I kind of feel like Yeah.
So you think Chrome is probably checking the profiles and is getting this info synchronously, basically.
That's what we're doing for get capabilities in WebRTC.
Okay. Yeah,
but
that makes sense.
that could be different than, because it's a completely different MIME type in Media Recorder. So I don't know how that works.
Okay. Yonivar?
Yeah, so first just a clarification on the PR. I looked it up and it does return false. So I think the PR aligns with your view that if type supported should return false. You might have gotten confused because it's a little, it's using the same algorithm. So there's a variable called defer newer codecs check that is only true from the constructor.
Okay. So maybe I misunderstood it, actually.
Well, that's good. Then we agree.
Okay. Okay. Then we really need the list to be very precise and yeah.
So, and also in my PR, I also limited the list to not mention anything about profiles or levels because we have these legacy names like H264 is an alias for AVC1, I think. And so there's a way to specify, a period and then all kinds of profile level and all the other stuff. And I was also hoping to keep that out of its type supported and just basically have, because to me, it doesn't seem that bad if you specify a profile. If you don't specify a profile level, then the browser will just pick a profile level in that case, which seems like a good fallback. And it seems reasonable, and it doesn't expose as much information. So
yeah, that's what we're doing with Safari. We're not checking the profile, basically.
Right.
So so you're saying Firefox is doing it probably, and apparently Chrome might not be doing it. Might be more doing tighter checks there, I think.
Firefox at the moment only supports VT8 and Opus. So
okay. Okay. Okay, so I'll file another issue for this one, I guess. And related to the PR, I really think we need to have a PCM and HEVC as well. I think it will be difficult for us since we shipped HEVC. It will be difficult for us.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to ask, because I think both Safari and Firefox shipped the HEVC support, or at least Safari.
No.
Safari, not Firefox.
Not Firefox.
No. Sorry. Okay. And we want to ship it. We should align on whether or not it's in the list. Not shipped yet, but ready to ship.
So I would be okay with PCM. I was hoping not to do HEVC because when we decided this a year ago, I think HEVC was called out specifically as one codec where hardware support might be difficult to obtain synchronously. So I know there's a web compatibility argument here.
You're probably right there, but like, so didn't Safari already ship? What does Safari do here?
The Safari is shipping, and if you say HEVC, it will return true. And
so that would be a web compat problem if we say false.
So yes, so my appeal here would be that it's not a big web compat problem, because in order to be interoperable, websites would need to have fallback strategies for codecs anyway. So there might be a period here where, and I think most websites here, correct me if I'm wrong, would probably just offer the user choices about here are some codecs you can pick from. And in those cases, having a fallback strategy might work as a temporary measure until people call media capabilities and find the
if you have a drop-down list and HEVC is type supported, HEVC is returning false, you will not have HEVC in the list.
Yes,
and the user will not be able to select it. Yeah, that's the issue.
Yes, I'm saying it's definitely a backwards compatibility issue, but I'm saying it's not as bad as a website breaking, in that there's a limitation of options offered to users in areas where there's already a fallback decision in order to be interoperable.
Yeah, I can go back internally to the people, but I'm not sure we'll change our implementation there. So,
Okay. Well, I would like to
yeah.
ask at least. I think this is the forum to
Okay.
ask in.
Sure. Okay. I'll check further, but
Thanks.
yeah, I'm sure PCM is definitely a web compat issue, and I'll check
Yeah,
whether HVC is.
PCM, I understand, is an older codec, right?
Yeah.
So I have no problem adding PCM. I can add it to the list of the PR.
Okay. So yeah, so there's one action item for HVC. I'll add another issue for this one. And next slide. So if we want actually to do deprecation, we need to do other things than editing the spec. We need to update NDN, WP test, WEBRTC GitHub test pages, maybe dev pages as well. I don't know if it really matters, but it's important as well that we say, hey, the test example should say go to media capabilities, basically. I don't know if media capabilities are correctly implemented for recording in Chrome and Firefox. But I think it is in Safari, so we are ready to, we would like to push for changes in MDN and so on.
Works in Firefox.
All right.
Just about web platform tests. In order to fully test this API, we have to have an implemented API, an implemented codec that is not in the codec list. Do we have a candidate for that?
And
I think VP9 is or
we can add like CLAC, like an audio codec. That is being read, for instance, in Chrome, Safari, or Firefox. But in any case, I don't know. What I want to do is removing the usage of is type supported, wherever it is, like MDN, WP test, WebRTC, GitHub, and replace that by using media capabilities, so that web developers, when they try search for media recorder, they will see, oh, I need to use media capabilities. And if we're not doing that, they will continue probably using is type supported, and we will never be able to.
Yeah.
Like,
and doing the documentation is good.
Yeah.
And also adding web platform tests that use the media capabilities API and verify that against actually creating recorders. So yes, that can be tested.
Yeah. Dom?
Yeah, a couple of points. So on MDN, I'm happy to help connect the dots if needed. I'm part of the MDN product advisory board there. In general, there was, I think, a breakout session at last TPAC, or maybe one before, about how to manage deprecations for the web platform. So there may be lessons to draw from there on how to do that. Well, okay. I recall there was discussion around indeed whether to show messages in the console and things like that. So again, I don't recall if there was a very specific how-to, but at least it's probably worth checking it out.
Okay. Yeah, if you have a link, then it might be useful in the minutes. Okay. So should we file an issue in Media Recorder to keep track of that effort?
Sorry, keep track of the default? What do you mean?
Keep track of that effort to like updating MDN, WPS and so on, because otherwise
yes,
we might forget about it. Okay. Yeah. So I'll take an action to do that as well.
Thank you. All right, this is my slide, I think. You filed this issue, but I tried to put a slide. You filed the asking should apply constraints reject when track is muted. And so this is, and I think your reasoning for that was that in that case, you were wondering if the implementation would be able to apply the right constraints. And specifically, if you specify like an exact constraint that needs to, will it be able to still run the constraints algorithm and fail with over-constrained error in the right cases, or apply the right resolution for when the track comes back. So when I looked in the spec, it says the user agent should relinquish a device if all tracks are muted or disabled. So that's that doesn't seem to be a specific call out for muted. And there's some differences in implementation here. Safari does, from my limited testing, it looks like Safari mutes. There's a pause control in the URL bar in Safari where you can pause capture, which causes the track to mute and the light to go out. And the Firefox does this also for track enabled equals false. So if you do track enabled equals false, and that brings all tracks to of the same source to false, then Firefox will relinquish. The light will go out in Firefox as well. We currently do not do the same for microphone. There's a prep for that, but there was some internal reason why we chose not to do that. There's also in Firefox, there's a prep for an experiment we did with global mute control. So we have the same behavior for muted tracks as well that people can test. So I think the feedback from GitHub there was basically this language reads like an optimization, and that rejection would be disruptive, unnatural with some of the words, and reveal browser differences. So, and Get Easy Media already validates constraints ahead of device acquisition, I believe. So I don't think there would be an issue there. So I wrote a fiddle that tries to do apply constraints from a slider that you can drag back and forth for height that provides an ideal value, but also a minimum value, so that if you drag the slider too high, you should get over constrained error. And it seems to work in all browsers absent device, meaning I tested it in Safari and Firefox, and I don't believe Chrome has a way to turn off the device light, so I wasn't able to test that. So the proposal is to not reject. Henrik?
What happens if you initially open the camera in VGA and then it mutes, and then you apply constraints in HD? Because my understanding is that would, unless there are other sources or uses of the same source, that you would actually reconfigure the camera, that it basically close it and then open it again in HD. Yes. But if the camera is relinquished and the light is out, how would you know whether to accept or reject? Like, you don't know if HD worked until you actually open the camera in HD. So what happens?
Well, I think you do actually know, because part of Get User Media, the constraints algorithm runs before you acquire the device. So these behaviors are generally observably known ahead of time, I think.
Okay, so you would optimistically accept because you know it's a valid setting, and then if for some reason capture fails to start, you just fire on ended, I guess.
And
like
the behavior that you described is exactly what I want to focus on next, which is that I do observe some differences. So when you do what Henrik described here, then Safari will update track settings immediately. I should have written get settings there. So the fiddle has basically a local video element that plays back, and so you can test it yourself. And there's a checkbox to enable or disable the track, and a slider to apply different constraints to height. And so in Safari, we see that the track settings, get settings update immediately. but I see that the element with video width and video height update on unmute, which makes sense because we're not providing any frames in that case. Well, we're providing black frames, I guess. So it makes sense to me that the video element would not update until you later unmute. And Firefox is a little different. It does not update track get settings immediately. So when you re-enable the track or unmute from the behind the press mute control, both the video width and video height on the element and track settings get updated later. So I'm proposing to converge on the Safari behavior basically in this case. Ewan?
Yeah, I wonder what Firefox is doing. Maybe Firefox is delaying the applying the constraints until the device is restarting somehow.
No, because you can also call get constraints. So apply constraints will succeed, the promise will resolve, and you can call track get constraints. I think that's the benefit of the constraint model here, is that constraints are applied to tracks. And that process is sort of independent of whether you have an actual device or not. So in both Firefox and Safari, when you re-enable the video, at that point, you get the new, you can see the effect basically.
Okay. I'm fine with the proposal. I think that in that case, I will need to fix a bug in Safari, which is that I don't want a tab that is muted to be able to change the configuration of the camera for another tab that is capturing. And currently, it's the behavior in Safari. So that's why I filed this issue, because I really don't want for a page. If a page is muted, it should not be able to change the camera settings, the hardware camera settings. It's okay to actually change the track settings, but the track settings will only be applied actually to the real camera when it gets unmuted. I was trying to be maybe a bit lazy there and do something like either reject or delay. But if over in the working thing that we should go with this approach, which is probably easier for web developers, then I'm fine with it.
Yeah, that seems like good to me. It seems like an implementation decision. But if you want some language in the spec to encourage user agents to not touch other tabs, in that case, we could do that as well, I think. Guido, was that you?
Yes. Yeah, I think converging and updating track settings is what makes sense for camera tracks, since settings for camera tracks, at least width and height, are intended. The intention is to reflect the configuration, not the properties of the last frame. So if you apply constraints and it's successful, then it means that you have successfully configured the track to have some new setting. And you shouldn't need to wait for a frame to update that.
Cool, sounds good, thanks. Ewan?
Yeah, just to say that it might, in some cases, it might be hard to actually implement that. And in that case, my approach would be to pretend to have applied settings. And if I end up in a situation where I'm not able to apply settings, then I would probably fire a configuration change event to let know the web application that we were not actually able to apply the settings, and here are the settings, and it's up to the web page to react to that. Hopefully it's marginal, but that's the way I would handle it.
That makes sense to me. We don't implement that event yet, but that would follow logically, I think. Also, in cases where we relinquish the device, if we later fail to reacquire the device, we also end the track. So there's a spectrum of options there to maintain the model. The website won't know whether the error happened sooner or yeah. There's a way out to inform the JavaScript in all cases. Great, thanks. So I'm hearing resolution is to proceed with the PR to clarify this. Do you want some advice for user agents for the case you wanted, Johan?
I think it's fine. Maybe we should encourage, like when you say settings immediately, we should probably not, like, be clear that user agents should not delay applying the settings until unmuted. So
Okay.
as long as it's clear in
Okay.
the PR, then I think we're good.
All right, great. We have 2 minutes. If we can go to next slide, we might actually make it. I can quickly go here that WEBRTC PC issue 2967 points out that implementations only update get parameters codecs when negotiation has finished. This is the behavior observed in all browsers. So the spec here is wrong. The spec says to update receive codecs in the codecs to the codecs that the description negotiates in set local description, which is typically, only partway through the negotiation process. There's even another internal slot to keep the last stable version in case there's a rollback. And I think the proposal is to align the spec with implementations, which is to work the same basically for receive codecs and encodecs. Any objection to this?
No, makes sense. Ship it.
All right, then we're done. Is that the last slide? All right, I think that was it. We made it to the end of the meeting. And see you all next month.
See you next month.
Thanks.
See?
Bye.
Stop the recording.